Welcome to the newest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit pseg.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. If you've been watching any of our content over the last decade, you know this guy. He is Rick Serritella, NFL Draft Bible, also one of the scouts for the NFLPA Bowl for a lot of the college prospects coming out in the draft. Rick, it's good to see you, man. How you be?
Johnny on the spot. How are you, brother? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, man. A little bit later, we're going to dig deep into some smaller school prospects with Rick, because that's kind of his forte here. But first, let's focus on what Giant fans want to hear about in terms of what the Giants might do in this draft. And Rick, before we get into some of the details, how would you classify the overall quality of this draft and just the type of prospects that are coming out, strengths, weaknesses, as compared to some of the ones the last few years?
What a fascinating draft, John, in terms of blue chip prospects, because I think even up until the Jalen Carter off the field incident, I think you had two quote unquote blue chip prospects. You had the four quarterbacks that look like they're going to go inside the top 10. So after that, the guys from 5 to 50, I mean, you've got such an evenly grouped class of prospects. And I think that's why the Chicago Bears felt comfortable sliding down from 1 to 9, because, hey, they could still potentially get a guy like Jalen Carter, or they're going to at least be guaranteed a top 5 player on their board, because I do think the quarterbacks will get pushed up the board. Offensive tackle is another position, John, that always gets pushed up the board. Ironically enough, I don't know if we'll see any inside the top 10, but I think you could see maybe 5 come off the board between 10 and 20.
Yeah.
And then cornerbacks is an interesting one too, because I think it's very deep. It's talented, but I think you'll be making a mistake if you think you can get one of these guys on the come around on day 2. I think they're going to come off the board early, fast, furious. And one other position I will mention that does bode well for the Giants. I can't remember a tight end class this deep where you could get potential starters. I'm talking about round 3, round 4. You might be able to grab a guy that could come in and start. That's how deep the tight end class is.
Yeah, look, and you hit a bunch of spots we're going to talk about here, Rick. So let's start corners. So we'll start there. And I agree with you. I think once you get past, and again, we'll see what happens with, Carter and all the off the field stuff. You have Anderson. I could see the next non-quarterback off the board being a cornerback. That would not surprise me at all. And I could see 4 off the board by the time the Giants even pick at 25.
I would agree with that. I think it's what's your flavor of the week. Devin Witherspoon, probably the best overall prospect. However, he's 5'11", $190. When you compare him to some of these other gargantuan cornerbacks, I mean, a guy like Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon, he's 3 inches taller, runs just as fast, and is a pretty good cover corner in his own right. So to me, I think the Giants would do well at getting one of these bigger body cornerbacks. And I agree. Witherspoon will be gone. Joey Porter Jr. will most likely be gone, the cornerback from Penn State. Kaylee Ringo from Georgia is probably your 4th guy. So those guys are all going to come off the board. And then, do you go for a guy like Emmanuel Forbes, who the frame might not be there, but the coverage skills is there? I think he's in the equation there. I think you could also maybe take a flyer on day 2. I know the Giants have 57th pick. If they do miss out on a cornerback, one guy to keep an eye on, Garrett Williams from Syracuse. This guy was being talked about as a potential 1st-round pick, tore his ACL very early in the season and kind of has become a forgotten man. But I'll tell you what, he's going to outplay a lot of cornerbacks chosen ahead of him.
Is he a guy that you think could last till round 3? Or do you think someone's going to jump on him before that?
The Giants pick at 89. I think there's a possibility there because of the injury concern that he could still be there. And he would fit more of a nickel slot type of corner.
Got it. All right. So I agree with you. I think you could take Porter, Gonzalez, and Witherspoon and say, no, forget it. You got no shot, right? You mentioned Ringo as your 4th guy. One guy you didn't mention was Deonte Banks, who was a bigger guy who worked out well at the combine, played a ton of press man at Maryland. I like his tape. Would he be a guy that would be in the mix for you at 25, or is that a little bit too rich for you?
No, absolutely. I think he's kind of off the radar because he's not from one of these powerhouse programs. And then he kind of blew up the combine over there at Lucas Oil Stadium. But then it made scouts go back and say, hey, wait a second here. We got ourselves a potential starting cornerback down there in Maryland. And, they do a good job there of preparing their guys for the next level. Their pro liaison, Kevin Glover, former NFL player. So he does a great job preparing these guys for the next level. I think you take a look at a guy like Banks. He's actually a plug and play guy. So yes, I think that's a good call by you, Johnny. I think 5, maybe half a dozen cornerbacks in round 1.
Yeah, Ringo and Forbes are interesting. I want to dig a little bit more into them, because, we'll see at 25 and, who knows if, I don't think one of those guys will drop, but, Ringo's got all the physical ability in the world. He looks great running around, but then you watch his tape and frankly, guys are just open a lot when he's covering them, right? And he gets beat too much. Then you watch Forbes and, I don't know if he's a press guy. I think his best stuff isn't off. His ball skills are phenomenal. His coverage is great, but what are you hearing from scouts on him, given he's only 168 pounds, yet 6 feet tall? So I think it's interesting. 2 different aspects with these guys that worry you. They're 2 very different things, but I could see both of them kind of pushing them maybe out of that first round.
Yeah, and I think with Forbes, his body frame is unique. Like you said, he's very frail, especially that lower bottom. I mean, his shins, you look like
toothpicks.
twigs. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's natural to have some concern, right? When you're playing in the National Football League, somebody's going to fall on that leg. It's going to be a fragile situation. So I do think that maybe knocks him down a peg or 2. However, I still think he's a top 50 overall selection. In regards to Ringo, he did have a streaky season, and he drew some tough assignments there throughout the season. Now, I thought he recovered some of the concern there, to your point, being able to stick the change of direction, the movement skills. When you watched him at the combine go through the W drills and do some of the positional work, I thought he kind of cleared up some of the concerns there. I think that he's in that tier 2 cornerback class that brings big time pedigree. And so again, that's the thing when you're picking at 25, do you really want to settle for the 5th or 6th best cornerback, or do you want to go and get yourself one of the top tier players at another position? I think that's what the dilemma the Giants will be facing at 25.
How do you see Cam Smith? Because I know a lot of people see him as a 1st round pick. I see him as more of a 2nd round pick personally. When I went back and I watched the South Carolina tape, your thoughts on him, and Egan, throwing your thoughts on his teammate Darius Rush, who I thought had a great Senior Bowl. But then you look at the tape and you're like, that guy tested like that at the combine, and you don't really, to me, I don't see the play speed match up with the testing speed in Indy.
No, Rush is a perfect example of a guy who's kind of elevated his stock through the process. He's kind of checked off all the boxes during the draft process, and I think he's a developmental guy. You peg him in day 3 and you work with him. You maybe redshirt him the first year and bring him up to speed, but he has the tools to be a competent backup at the next level. I think he showed that down at Mobile. Not the greatest stick-'em cover guy, but a guy that can be adequate and won't get you killed. And, for Cam, I think he's had a great resume. I think, again, he falls a little bit short when compared to some of the other guys, but you talk about the length, the speed, the athleticism, it's all there.
Any other corners? You mentioned the Syracuse guy coming off the ACL. If the Giants don't go corner round 1, anyone else, Rick, stick out to you that you can grab in round 2 or round 3, even if it's not a plug and player, that you think has the ability to develop and eventually become a starter? And remember, keeping in mind with Wing Martindale, the Giants want to play a lot of that press man.
Yeah, I'll give you one guy. It's probably not a day 2 guy, but one guy that just keeps coming back to my memory, John, is this Keenan Isaac out of Alabama State. We had him out at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, and he turned a lot of heads. And our Southeast scout, he gave us a heck of a player comparison. He said he's a blend between Cornell Green, who was part of that Doomsday Dallas defense, and Antrell Roll, who Giants fans will remember. And I said, man, that is one heck of a comparison. And he came out there. He played great man coverage. He's like 6'1", 6'2", another one of these 200-pound corners. Keep an eye on him. Some people like him at safety. I thought he did enough to play corner. If you want a day 2 guy, Clark Phillips III out of Utah. We talked about Garrett Williams in that slot position. Clark Phillips out of Utah, redshirt sophomore, maybe a little bit of a forgotten guy. He is a playmaker, 6 interceptions, a handful of pick 6 returns. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. That's the kind of guy the Giants need. Somebody that has a propensity for turnovers, somebody that can take the ball the other way, somebody that can score with the ball in his hands. And Julius Brents from Kansas State and DJ Turner, we talked about testing. those are the byproducts of what good testing can do. Those guys will get pushed up maybe inside the top 100, John, day 2 guys, because of how well they tested. DJ Turner, as far as we know, the fastest player in this year's draft. I'll give you one other guy that I like that really flunked, and he ran 4.5, ran a poor 40 time. His pro day, I think it was a 4.7, but Coastal Carolina, Lance Boykin. I mean, I really broke down the East-West Shrine film, and this Coastal Carolina guy, he reminded me of Josh Norman. All he did was make plays, bait the quarterback, anticipate really well. Because of the 40-yard dash time, John, he might not even get drafted. But I'm telling you, he's a make-it kind of guy.
Interesting. It's funny. I was going to ask you about Brenton Turner because I think, Turner's testing, again, I think was probably a little bit better than his tape. You watch him, you're like, wow, he moves so well. And then you're like, I don't know why he's giving up so many receptions. It's odd. Like, I feel like it's there. And then Brent's with his agility 3-cone stuff at his size at 6'3" was off the charts. I think he's a perfect 3rd-round developmental guy if you want to go in that direction. You mentioned tight end. Let's go there next, Rick, because I'm with you. Look, the Giants have already done some work with Darren Waller, obviously, in a trade. He is 30 years old, though, so you always want to try to future-proof the position. I don't think it's quite as essential as before. I think it's out of the realm of possibilities now for first round, so we can take that first tier out of it. You mentioned you might be able to find a starter around 3, round 4. Who are some of the guys that you're talking about in that area that maybe the Giants could be fishing in those waters?
Yeah, let's talk about Payne Durham out of Purdue. I mean, this guy, he gives off Kevin Boss vibes, right? Doesn't really impress in any one particular area. Not the fastest guy, not going to make the splash plays. But I'll tell you what, all he does is make plays. And he can line up at H-back. He can line up. I've seen him in the backfield as a blocker. I've seen him out wide as a wide receiver. Payne Durham out of Purdue. This man gets no love. I think he's a big-time playmaker. Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion, a Power 5 transfer. He has all the pedigree, the size, the athleticism.
Where did he transfer from, Rick? Do you remember?
Kuntz, I think he was a Virginia Tech transfer. Okay, so he was right in that Old Dominion area. And he's another guy that's kind of flying under the radar. That'll be taken probably day 3. Davis Allen from Clemson. I mean, the Clemson staff cannot talk enough about this young man. Not only the character, but the coaching staff says he's the best blocking tight end that the Clemson staff has ever seen. I mean, that's some pretty high praise.
That's high praise.
Yeah, coming out of Clemson for Davis Allen. So I think he's a guy, early day 3, could come in and start. Luke Schoonmaker, if you take a look at what Jimmy Harbaugh has done with tight ends, going back to his days at Stanford, really, this guy coaches up tight ends like no other. Schoonmaker is another guy, not going to be explosive in the pass game, but could come in, do a little bit of everything very, very well. And, man, there is just such tremendous depth. I mean, you take a look at Jaleel Billingsley, who started over at Alabama, quit the team at Texas at one point this past season, came back, played for us at the NFLPA Bowl, just timed, I think, a 4.58 at his pro day. Now teams are going to want to say, hey, what happened? Does he love the game? Why did you leave the team? What's the whole scenario there with Sark? And you got to feel comfortable with that. But there's a guy, late round flyer, Kamari Everett, Bethune-Cookman, transfer from Louisville, was dismissed on rape allegations. Case was later dismissed. So again, he was a huge mammoth pass-catching, productive tight end out of Bethune-Cookman. If you talk about size, athleticism, the whole combination, Kamari Everett is a really good-looking player. I know we had Maurice Jones-Drew from NFL Network out at the PA Bowl. He couldn't stop gushing about this young man.
All right, let's jump over to wide receiver, Rick, because I do think this is a possibility. There are reports out there that Brian Dable met with, and Joe Shane and the Giants crew met with Jackson Smith and Jigba before that Ohio State Pro Day. Again, we're not confirming that, but that's what the report said. Your thoughts on this first round group? I think if you combine last year's class with this year's class, probably the first one from this year is going like 5th or 6th, probably at best, maybe 7th. Who do you think is going to be there when the Giants get to 25 first and foremost? They've already kind of brought in a bunch of guys that are very, very adept at playing in the slot. So if you're looking for someone that can maybe give you some outside snaps as well as slot snaps and would be available, and then we'll dip into the later rounds on the follow-up, who do you think could be in the mix in that first round?
Well, first, I would say not so fast, my friend, because if Jackson Smith and Jigba was in this draft last year, based on his season last year, he was technically the number 1 guy at Ohio State, not Garrett Wilson, not Chris Olave. And I think that, you know, some people thought he kind of maybe mailed it in with the hamstring injury early in the season, tried to come back from it, didn't really maybe push his body to the limits and said, hey, you know what, guys, I'm good. I'm going to get ready for the draft. And you talk about the 3-cone and the short shuttle. I mean, these are elite times. The change of direction ability is there. It was between 4.48, 4.52 at his pro day. So I think he truly is the number one wide receiver in this year's draft, at least. And yes, he will be off the board. I think it's what's your flavor?
Wait, hold on. So you get Giant fans all excited. They're like, oh, yeah, but he's not going to be there, so don't worry about
it. Hey, I just had to get that in there, Jack.
That's fine.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it's funny because they've been hot to trot on this Zay Flowers. I know they've been whining and dining him. From what I understand is the Giants love Zay Flowers. Now, to your point, leading into the wide receiver, they got so many slot weapons, right? I mean, I feel like they got Wendell, they got Sterling, I think they just signed somebody else.
Paris Campbell, Crowder. Yeah.
So to me,
a long list.
It's not really the best fit. And to me, Flowers is a guy very similar to Kadarius Toney, quite frankly. I'm not sure if he's a legit bona fide starter. I mean, I think he's a gadget guy. You get the ball in space, you do him in motion, and you let him do damage. That's just how I see him. I might be an outlier. I know he's gotten the Steve Smith comparison.
I got to be honest with you. People are all over the map on him. You know, some people have him as like a top 3 receiver in the draft. Like Dane Brugler, for example, has him a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So people are all over the map. Why do you see him more as kind of like the slot gadget guy rather than somebody that can, you know, be someone that can run the whole route tree outside?
You know, I just didn't see. I've been into Chestnut Hill, and I never left saying, you know, that's a 1st round wide receiver. That's just my eye test. I didn't see it. Maybe I'm wrong, John. I don't know. Everybody's comparing this guy to Steve Smith. I don't see that level of physicality. I don't see the Deebo Samuel. I mean, I think it could have a Deebo Samuel kind of impact. I just don't see that yard after the catch. Maybe I'm missing the boat there. But to me, I look at a guy like Marvin Mims from Oklahoma who could probably be had in the 3rd or 4th round. I don't know if Marvin Mims might be better than Zay Flowers, to be quite honest. That's just me. Zay Flowers, to me, is not a top 5 wide receiver in this year's draft. Jordan Addison from USC I have is number 2. I don't think that's the best. You know, he's another one of these movement guys. Maybe not necessarily an outside guy. Maybe he's a slot guy. He's a pre-snap motion guy. I don't think that's a good fit for the Giants. Quentin Johnston from TCU, to me, he's my number 3 guy. He would make sense for the Giants. Length, size. You pair him with Hodgins, right? Opposite of each other. He's a more athletic type of Isaiah Hodgins. And they don't have a true number 1 guy. So why go get a gadget guy when you need a bona fide number 1 guy? And, you know, again, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, a lot of people are putting him right in the 1st round. I understand it. Speed is a great trait.
He's raw.
But he's a one-trick pony.
Yeah, he's raw. Right? Very raw.
One-trick pony. It's a great trick to have, but you're just getting a guy who runs fly routes. And to me, that's not necessarily a 1st round pick.
Rick sounds like someone that's gotten into a lot of debates online about this wide receiver class. You're fired up. All right. I think we're kind of on the same page on all that. All right. Let's go to that day 2, day 3 area now, because we've seen a lot of the receivers, frankly, get drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round the last couple of years be better than the guys that have gone in the 1st round, right? I like the one name you mentioned, Marvin Mims. I'm going to throw a couple of names at you. You can hit these guys, or then you can go elsewhere if you want. I really love Josh Downs. I think he's great, but I do think he's a slot-only guy. Big fan, and I was surprised I liked him as much as I did, because I'm usually not a big fan of the bigger wide receivers on tape. I thought A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest was phenomenal when I watched him. I thought his body control, adjusting to the ball down the field, was excellent. And, you know, Rishi Rice, I think, is a safe pick. I know there's off-the-field stuff with him, from what I understand. Michael Wilson, you get by the injuries. Then I think a guy like Jaden Reed's very safe. Who are the guys that you really like day 2 or day 3 that you think could fit the Giants?
Now, Wilson out of Stanford, he really caught my eye. I think was he at the Senior Bowl?
Senior Bowl, yeah.
Injury situations as well, but he's a special teams guy. I think he's a prototypical like wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 that comes in, plays special teams. Reed, you mentioned from Michigan State, very sound route runner. I agree. Probably a safe pick. You know what you're getting there. Not as much of an upside. Rice, you know, again, I think you got to do the homework there and make sure you're comfortable, as you do with a guy like Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. He's got some off the field baggage, but let's be honest, this time last year, we were talking about him as a potential first round pick. Now, you might be able to get him round 4, round 5.
He didn't test well either. So,
no, he didn't test well, but this whole past season for this guy, I think you got to wipe it off the map. I mean, nothing has gone according to plan for him, and he's just had a bad luck. Maybe the luck has been created by himself. I want to find out. I haven't sat down with the young man and had a conversation with him, but I know what, when he's on, he's on. And you mentioned Downs. To me, he's a little bit too wiry. He's a small, thin guy. I understand the skill set, but to me, maybe didn't time or test as well. I still think Tank Dell out of Houston has tremendous separation ability.
Sure. No, he does.
And because he ran, a 4.50, he might go early day 3 now. To me, that's a tremendous value pick. Trey Palmer out of Nebraska might have the biggest hands in this year's draft, and he's fast as lightning. And Ronnie Bell, I thought, he coming off that injury was kind of under the radar. He was one of the fastest timed players down at the Senior Bowl. I think he hit like 22, 23 miles per hour on the catapult technology. So to me, that's a young man to keep an eye on. And I know we were going to talk some sleepers later on in the draft, but I can't contain myself.
Yeah, give it to me. What do you got?
Keelan Harris is getting drafted, my friend. Oklahoma Baptist. Who? What? Huh? Remember the name, Keelan Harris. I mean, he met with just about every NFL team out in Pasadena. By the end of the week, the scouts were just calling him Hollywood. And I was pounding the table trying to get him down in Mobile with our good friend Jim Nagy. Keelan Harris, Oklahoma Baptist. He is a playmaker.
Give me with tall, smaller guy. How does he play?
Yeah, he comes in. He's about 6 foot, 200. He can beat you deep. He can beat you underneath. He can do a little bit of everything. Very sneaky route runner. Very dependable hands. And again, just create separation in short area spaces. I mean, nobody could guard this young man in one-on-one drills. And that to me is the ultimate litmus test. When you are constantly schooling the opposing cornerbacks in one-on-one drills and they can't cover you, that to me tells me there's something special about him.
All right, I'm going to throw a couple of these day 2, I think, who are outside receivers at you. Sort through them for me. Who do you like? Why? You already mentioned a couple of them. Rashee Rice is one. We mentioned him. You could talk about him again if you like. Throw A.T. Perry in the mix. Throw Tyler Scott from Cincinnati in the mix. I know a lot of people really like him. And then Matt Landers, who I thought was really interesting when I watched him out of Arkansas. Give me those 4 guys and how you kind of would separate them. And if you think they are day 2 guys, and if so, why?
Yeah, Hazelwood and Landers from Arkansas kind of did stand out to me. I like what they can do after the catch too. Maybe didn't test as well. The Cincinnati wide receiver, again, I think people were expecting him to be one of the faster guys.
Yeah.
And he can stretch the field, and I think he brings that size speed element. I think he's quicker than fast, right? He's got better game speed than maybe time speed. So I do like him. A.T. Perry, I think, great route runner for a guy of his size. All he does is get open, make big plays, big catch radius. So you like that. And I think that's what the Giants need to trend in, is getting some of these bigger body pass catchers that Daniel Jones could feel safe throwing the ball to. And so, I'll throw one other guy out there that we had, Joseph Nagata from Clemson, 6'3.5", about 205 pounds, runs in the mid 4.5 range. He was moving at a different speed at the All-Star circuit. He played in both the PA Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. Thought he had a tremendous week. How about Mitchell Trubisky? Mitchell, the wide receiver from Penn State.
Parker Washington you're talking about?
No. There's another. He transferred from Western Kentucky. Mitchell, I think it's another T. It's slipping my mind. Mitchell Tinsley.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was going to say, again, if Mitch Trubisky is back in the draft as a wide receiver, that'd be pretty damn impressive.
He might need to re-enter the draft in different positions. But yeah, this Mitchell Tinsley, I went out to Happy Valley back in August, and the coaching staff said, hey, we love Parker Washington, but we really think Mitchell Tinsley is kind of a 1A, 1B type of situation. And I think he may have led the nation in receiving the year before at Western Kentucky, catching the ball from Bailey Zappi. Now, he's another guy that he can play outside. He can play inside. He's going to be moved, pre-snap motion guy. You see a lot of that proliferation into the NFL, right? These college offenses, that pre-snap movement, Mitchell Tinsley's one of those guys. You get the ball in his hands in space and watch him work.
All right. Any other wide receivers you want to throw out there, Rick, before we move on to running backs?
I mean, we got to show some love to Andre Yosivas, right, from Princeton,
Absolutely.
the Jersey guy right down the road. I mean, when's the last time a Princeton player was invited to the Senior Bowl? I mean, that was great to see, and I think he
did well too. He did well.
Yeah, he did. He held his own. Former track standout, and I will say this one other guy. Talk about a big body pass catcher out of UCLA. If you weren't up on the late night, Jake Bobo. This guy's got size. He's got what you call sneaky athleticism. And he really emerged, I thought, as Dorian Thompson-Robinson's number one target. And I think he transferred. He might have came over from Colorado. Chip Kelly really worked the transfer portal to his favor this past year. I thought his biggest find was Jake Bobo. And I can't find a lot of love out there for him. I think he's a draftable guy. I don't know if he gets chosen or not. I'll throw one other guy, Justin Shorter from Florida. Another one I thought to me was maybe the best wide receiver at the East-West Shrine Bowl all week long. And then Tyrone Scott from Missouri State. Here's a guy who wasn't invited to any All-Star games, but was invited to the Combine, I believe. Missouri State, Tyrone Scott. He's a guy in the draft community that is gaining a lot of buzz.
All right, let's go to the running back class, Rick. We haven't mentioned that yet. Giants have Saquon Barkley on a franchise tag, so he's only under control for 1 year. They'd like for him to be here longer. We'll see if they can work something out. But in the meantime, you try to future-proof yourself with these positions, right? And if you're going to do that at running back, I think this is a great draft for it. We know about Bijan Robinson. I mean, I would doubt the Giants would go there at 25, or maybe he's not even getting there. I don't know, but he's wonderful. We know Jahmyr Gibbs is really good. I don't think he's getting to the Giants in the second round. I think he'll be well off the board then. Anyone else that you would put close to those top two guys that you think would be off the board for the Giants with their second round pick before we dip into the guys that you like?
No, I think, to me, Bijan Robinson, for whatever it's worth, is a top 5 player in this year's draft. And it wouldn't surprise me, quite frankly, in 10, 20 years from now, when we look back at the 2023 NFL draft class and we say, hey, Bijan Robinson was the best player in this draft class. Why did we overthink it? Right. I think there's a little bit of that element. So to me, you've hit the nail on the head, though. Gibbs, I don't think there's a huge drop-off either between Robinson and Gibbs. I wouldn't be surprised if Gibbs goes in the first round. I don't think it'll happen. I do think he'll be off the board before 57. And then after that, listen, Tyjae Spears out of Tulane, the Green Wave, he is just growing on me. I know he's only like $185 soaking wet, but man, his explosiveness, his change of direction, his vision. I mean, this guy is the goods. I really like what he brings to the table. Now, you want to go opposite end of the spectrum. I just talked about the UCLA wide receiver, the running back, Zach Charbonnet. I mean, this guy is a clone of James Conner when you watch him. So if you like a big, bruising, between the tackles type of runner, and, you're there at pick 89 or 128, and you can get a guy like Zach Charbonnet, I mean, I think that's a tremendous value. I mean, Chase Brown out of Illinois, this guy's going to go day 3. I think he has starter potential at the next level. I really do. I mean, Chase Brown is a tough, hard-nosed runner, can keep it between the tackles, can cut it outside if he needs to be, but he can't get any love in the national media. I mean, the running backs don't get love overall, period. You want to go a little bit, day 3, Muhammad Abraham from Minnesota is going to outplay a lot of these guys that get taken ahead of him, but he does have a kind of shopping list of injuries, right? And it's a quite extensive. So he might be a late round flyer, but if this guy is healthy, I mean, he could really play a big time role. Sean Tucker, again, from Syracuse. If you want the body clone of Saquon Barkley, Tucker's got these huge thighs, right? You might confuse him from Saquon Barkley if you put him in a big blue uniform. His thighs are big, they're thick, they're powerful. He didn't exactly have the season that I would have liked to seen, but I'll tell you what, he's got that track background. He's a big, powerful back. And one other guy, Chris Rodriguez. I had a chance to talk to the Kentucky running back coach out at the Combine. He just gushes over Rodriguez from Kentucky. Now he was suspended to start the season. So again, you got to do your homework there off the field. And again, let's shine the light on some guys in our own backyard. He just had his pro day this week. Owen Wright out of Monmouth. I'm going to continue to tout his praises because he is a 4-down player who's played all 4 special teams units. In my opinion, is the best short yardage runner in the entire draft. And I'll throw the Nevada kid, Toa. But to me, Owen Wright, what do you have? 16 touchdowns in 10 games. You need 2 yards, he gets you 3. You need 3 yards, he'll get you 3. Now, if you need 4 yards, Johnny, he's only going to get you 3. That's what Owen Wright brings to the table, though. He's a really impressive looking running back.
Yeah, and Rick, what I like about the running back class too, we talk about the wide receiver class, right? There's so many like 5'9", 5'10" guys that are 180 pounds and they run around. This running back class, you could check the boxes, man. You got a smaller guy like Spears. You want a big guy? All right, go draft Roshan Johnson out of Texas. Go draft, Evan Hull out of Northwestern. It's Kenny McIntosh. You want somebody that can do a little bit of everything, catch the ball? Yeah. Go draft him. Eric Gray is another one of these kind of mid-sized guys that I thought looked really good in Mobile. No matter what you're looking for flavor-wise in the running back position, you can find one up and down this draft board, rounds 1 through 5, 1 through 6.
Yeah, and I'll throw Deuce Vaughn in the equation there too.
Oh, talk about different shapes and sizes, man! Holy cow!
Yeah, and I mean for the listening audience at home that might not know, 5'5", 179 pounds for Deuce Vaughn, but he definitely plays bigger than the size. And I like the Kenny McIntosh. I know he only ran, I think 4.62, yep. But I think you're right. He brings a lot to the table. Can do a little bit of everything very well.
Yeah, and he mentioned, that's like Darren Sproles all over again, Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah,
and
really.
Trust me,
really
a smart head coach will find a way to use him, and he's going to be a pain in the ass to game plan for teams in this league for like 7-8 years. He just is.
One of my personal favorites in this year's draft, no doubt.
No question. All right, let's stick on offense. We're going a little long here, Rick, but I think it's great information. I like you throwing all these little school guys in there. I think people really gravitate towards these names, which is great. Let's go to offensive line. But once the Giants don't need an offensive tackle, so I'm not going to ask you about those guys unless you want to throw like a day 3 sleeper in that they could develop, because they could use a swing guy. So why don't we go there first? Give me a guy that you could draft to develop as a swing tackle maybe on day 3 of this draft.
How about Tyler Steen out of Alabama? He has some tackle experience. He has some good length, has the size to play tackle. I know some scouts prefer him to kick inside at the next level, but I'll tell you what, Alabama just had their pro day this week, and I think Tyler Steen is gaining some steam. And I think at the worst case scenario, you have yourself a very, very solid starting guard. At the best case scenario, you have a guy who could develop into a starting tackle.
Almost like a David Deal type of guy you're talking about.
Good
right?
one, yeah. And I'll tell you one guy he's not an inside-outside guy, but he reminds me of Charlie Villanueva and Ryan Sabota. I was down on the field at Virginia Tech about 5 or 6 years ago. There was this true freshman starter at left tackle, 6'9". I said, who the heck is this Jolly Green Giant? It's Ryan Sabota. Now, he almost died, if you remember Corey Stringer. He had almost the same exact incident with the heat stroke. Okay. He transferred to UCF to be closer to home. Now, he's all 100% healthy. He was playing left tackle at Pasadena at 6'9", and he has the bend and the athleticism to stay there. I talked to scouts. This is Charlie Villanueva, Ryan Sabota. Remember the name at tackle. In terms of a guard, I'll give you a late round guy again that is probably going to get drafted on day 3, come into the league, develop into a starter, and last a decade. Saidi Sal from Eastern Michigan. This guy is shaped like a refrigerator now, John. And he can move some bodies. And I'll tell you what, at first glance, I wasn't a big believer. As I studied him more and more, and scouts started talking him up, and I got a chance to see him in action. Saidi Sal from Eastern Michigan is a guy. But Cody Malk, I think, at 57 from North Dakota State, might still be on the board for Big Blue. And I could live with them on the outside. I could live with them on the inside. I prefer him probably at the guard, but I think he'll get every opportunity to compete at tackle. So I would also throw Nick Broker from Mississippi into the equation, because up until this year, he started his entire career at tackle. Now he kicked inside this past year, but he has the potential to do that. Brandon Council from Auburn is another guy that our offensive line coaches loved out in Pasadena. So, those are just some names to keep an eye on there.
You mentioned Cody Malk, and I think what's interesting about him, and let's dip into this category now. Giants need a center. It might be the most glaring need on their roster. Nick Gates moved on. John Feliciano moved on. They have some in-house veteran candidates, but no one that has been a natural player at that position per se. So I guess, do you think Malk can move in and play some center? He did it at the Senior Bowl a little bit. And who else do you like at center? And what would be the sweet spot for some of these guys that you think could step in and maybe even start at center in year one?
Yeah, center is a underrated position in this year's draft, and you might see two of them go in the first round. Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin, who's got athleticism. He's got a strong anchor. He's another one at Pro Day that really showed incredible strength, I thought, to combine with the athleticism. So
taller center too, 6'6".
Yeah, it's very, very rare that you see these bigger centers, because John Michael Schmitz comes in at 6'3.5". Steve Avila, who I think is more of a guard than a center. I know he's listed at center. We got to change our big board here at the Draft Bible. Avila is a guy, he could play all three interior spots, which I think bodes well. He's got great upper body strength. His lower body needs development, but Steven Avila is a guy that has starting potential. Now, here's the thing. I got a cheat code at the center position, so I'm not drafting one early on. And for what it's worth, I like John Michael Schmitz. I like the grappling. I like the state wrestling championship background. I'm a big believer in how that translates to the next level. But to me, John, I'm waiting. I'm waiting because I know that somewhere in the middle rounds, I'm going to take John Gaines from UCLA. And John Gaines is one of the most cerebral and versatile offensive linemen in the entire NFL draft. If you talk to the UCLA coaching staff, this guy is so smart. He's like a coach on the field. He started at all five positions. I truly believe that his best spot is at the center spot. And he did so well for us in Pasadena. The scouts urged him to go to the East-West Shrine Bowl. John Gaines, remember this name. He's going to start for a very, very long time in the National Football League. And Tashawn Manning, he's a cancer survivor, transferred to Kentucky this past year. He's played guard. He's played tackle. The coaching staff there told us his best center will be at center, again, because of the cerebral awareness.
Oh, great names. No one had brought John Gaines up to me yet. See, this is why we have Rick on. You learn new names. Now I got to go and watch them. All right, let's swap to the defensive side of the ball. Giants could still use some help at defensive tackle or interior or defensive line, 5 technique guys, things like that. Dexter Lawrence, who's going to be hopefully here a long time. They have another year on that contract. Leonard Williams only has 1 year left. They just signed Nacho Nunez Roches, pardon me, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But they could use some depth there, Rick. I don't see the value at 25, to be honest with you. But who do you like a little bit later on in the draft that could kind of be that, run stuffer, helper on the interior of that defensive line?
Well, I will say, if Leonard Williams is on his final year, Mazi Smith from Michigan, maybe not getting enough first-round buzz at 25.
Would you consider him at 25?
I would. I really would. I do, because I do think that you can never have enough offensive linemen or defensive linemen, right? And if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses in your own division, Philadelphia is stacked at the offense and defensive lines. They've got depth for days, and that's the team you're trying to knock off the mountaintop of that division. So, do
you see pass rush with Smith? Because when I watch him, he was on Feldman's Freaks list, right? And I don't think he's worked out of Michigan's Pro Day yet, right? I'm not sure when that's coming up. I don't think he did, or maybe he did. If so, I didn't see any numbers.
He didn't work out at the combine. I know. I don't know.
He did not.
I don't recall seeing Michigan's Pro Day just yet.
No, I don't think so either. But either way, when you watch the tape, you want to see. Oh yeah, I see the freakishness. I don't see the freakishness. Now, what I do see is a guy that literally will take an offensive lineman that's blocking him, move him aside, and then go make a play. But I don't know if I see that ability to kind of get upfield, and I worry about drafting a guy that I don't see the pass rush ability from in the first round. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you loud and clear, right? Because you want to see the athleticism match up to what you're seeing on film. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what Michigan wanted him to do
Great
on a
question.
frequent basis, right? So, like, I'm not going to penalize him for that. I do think that there's the potential, right? If you tap into it and need to use them in that kind of capacity, you can use them situationally. I do think he can, though, be a very effective edge setter against the run. He chases down the ball carriers. He got a high motor. He really gets after it. And if you're just looking for a big body who can move and give you solid play, which again, at I have him here at 6'3", 323.
Big
There's
man.
not, there's not too many guys that you're gonna find that big, that physical, that can move like that.
I
And
agree.
I'll tell you one of the biggest tragedies of the NFL scouting combine, the fact that Scott Matlick out of Boise State was not invited to the NFL scouting combine. I mean, what a missed opportunity by the NFL, because all this guy does is anchor the middle of the defensive line there for Boise State, the Broncos. He was unguardable at Pasadena, in Las Vegas at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Scott Matlock from Boise State is going to start in the league. He wasn't even invited to the NFL scouting combine, John. PJ Mustipher from Penn State coming off the injury. This guy, again, you talk about up here, right? That means a lot. James Franklin, the head coach at Penn State, said when PJ Mustipher is done playing in the National Football League, he's got a guaranteed coaching spot reserved for PJ Mustipher. That's how much he thinks of this young man. And I think people are sleeping on him because he's coming off the injury, might not have tested great. I'll give you another guy, Corey Durden, North Carolina State, the transfer from Florida State. Inside, outside versatility. He's played pass rusher. He's played defensive tackle. Again, another guy that can move very well, 300 plus pounds, very athletic for his size, has a little bit of nasty to him. Day 3 guy, going to outproduce some of the players chosen ahead of him.
All right, take linebacker any way you want, Rick.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the linebacker class. I don't think we're going to see any first-round guys. Trenton Simpson out of Clemson, for whatever is worth, is probably the guy there. I'll give you some guys that your listening audience might not be familiar with. Muhammad Diabate from Utah. Again, not invited to the NFL scouting combine. Unbelievable. Very raw, okay? Has to work on his instincts. But when I'm telling you, this guy flies to the football, stuffs the gaps, can be a very, very effective player as a linebacker against the run. Muhammad Diabate, this guy's a lump of clay. He can be molded into a starter at the next level.
How big is he, Rick?
Diabate, I have him. Let's see. I'm going to pull him up here for you on the fly. Diabate, I have at 6'3" and 3/8 inches, 229 pounds. John, I got him in the 4.55 range. 80-inch wingspan out of Utah. Just very raw, but extremely athletic. And then Isaiah Land out of Florida A&M, I think is a guy who will best be served as an off-ball linebacker at the next level. Now, at Florida A&M, he was asked to get after the quarterback, and he's probably, he's 6'2", 230, maybe something around there. I'm not sure he has the size to live on the edge at the next level, but he's another one that flies to the football. I think would be a very, very good off-ball linebacker in maybe the 3rd or 4th round, Isaiah Land.
I think people all over the place on the edge rushers in this class, Rick, to be honest with you. Will Anderson seems to be the consensus number 1, but I know some people that really like Tyree Wilson. And then, you get into a real messy area after that to me, the Miles Murphys, the BJ Ojularis, and the Will McDonalds, and these guys are all different shapes and sizes too. So how do you kind of break down that like next couple tiers of edge guys that, could fit a wink system that's pretty versatile, does a lot of different things. And, we saw him in, Baltimore, for example, have, Jason Owe out of Penn State, who didn't have much production, but was, super fast. Then, so maybe you're talking about the kid out of Georgia then. So how do you then break down that kind of set of edge guys? And because I really do think you kind of have to get one by round 3 if you want a guy that's going to be a real, impact player in the league.
Yeah, if you want an immediate impact guy, you're going to have to get one in the top 20 or even really the top 10. And Will Anderson is that guy, right? And I know that there's a small fraction of the scouting community who had some concerns, at least coming into the combine, about his size and his frame. Could he live as a 43 defensive end. I still think standing him up as a 34 outside linebacker is going to be your best bet. But I mean, listen, he can drop back in coverage now too, and that isn't too bad doing that either. I mean, there's really very few, if any, flaws to Will Anderson's overall game. So he is the consent. And I think, Jonathan Gannon, for whatever it's worth, I think the Cardinals are picking at 3. Will Anderson just makes so much sense to play that Hasim Reddick role for him. Now, Tyree Wilson, if you want a traditional 43 hand in the dirt defensive end, Tyree Wilson is that dude. And there are some guys that do have him ahead of Will Anderson in terms of their big board in the league. So those are the guys. I think, to your point, the way you break it down, like Keon White out of Georgia Tech and Will McDonald out of Iowa State, I think these guys are developmental edge rushers where you got the size, you got the athleticism. I mean, McDonald's got that crazy twitch, that bend. I mean,
that wicked spin move, man. Whoo.
Dude, I mean, he contorts his body. Remember Gumby and Pokey back in the. I mean, he's doing things that
Pokey, nice.
Yeah, you just can't teach some of these things, my friend. And so, to me, that's the allure of a Will McDonald maybe catapulting himself. And to your point, like Drew Sanders out of Arkansas, right? He's been asked to get after the quarterback. He's been asked to play some off-ball linebacker. Where do teams like him at the next level? Nolan Smith out of Georgia, I think, is going to get bumped inside the top 10 just on the athletic traits.
Top 10.
And you saw the same thing happen to his teammate last year, right? Trayvon Walker, people didn't really think about talking about this guy as the number 1 overall pick during the season. And then you get Nolan Smith, who was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And again, you're trying to project and create an edge rusher. Well, hey, Nolan Smith's got all the tools in the shed. That's a guy I want to work with and try to create. So he might not have necessarily done it at Georgia, but he's also playing with a bevy of talent that is using the rotation. He's coming off an injury. But if you're just saying, hey, I just fell onto planet Earth, I need myself an athletic pass rusher, this guy looks the part. Let's try to mold the Nolan Smith into an edge rusher. I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, BJ Thompson out of Stephen F. Austin is a guy, and Caleb Murphy out of Ferris State, 2 guys, day 3, you need to know. Baldonado, I got to show some love to my paisan. Moved from Italy, I think his junior year of high school. Very raw.
Really?
Game. Baldonado got that raw explosiveness, one of the fastest first steps in the draft. Baldonado out of Pittsburgh. And then Titus Leo right here in Staten Island. He was not even on the National or the Blesto, John. So I talked to scouts. They said, what do you know about the kid from Wagner? I said, he's a legit player.
He's good. He's a good player, man.
But you know what? Teams didn't even make the journey because scouting services didn't have him ranked. But anybody, and I know, with the Northeast Conference, he's one of the best pass rushers I've seen come through that conference in quite some time. And so I think he's another guy that people are sleeping on.
Yeah, and look, he hits all the benchmarks too for size, right? He's like 6'4", 6'5", he's 250. He will check all the boxes from an athleticism standpoint. Absolutely. All right, final position group here, Rick, is safety, where we didn't think the Giants would have a need, but with Julian Love going to Seattle and signing with the Seahawks, look, they have some guys there. They drafted Dane Belton last year. Jason Pinnock was good in a fill-in role this past season. But do you think Brian Branch might get to 25 because he didn't run too well at the combine? I think his field work, though, in Indy was phenomenal. He's so fluid. I know he's kind of one of these hybrid slot safety guys. And who else do you like at that position?
Yeah, I think the last mock I had, Branch coming off the board to the Packers, who I think choose before the Giants. So I think it's 50-50 as to whether Brian Branch will be there. And I think he is probably the top safety. He could play in the box. He could play center field. He could play a little bit of everything.
He's a good player.
So you can move him around. He's physical. To that point, Chris Smith out of Georgia does a lot of very similar things, not quite as big. So maybe that's a guy on day 2 that they might look at. I'm still a big believer.
Here's a question real quick. I want to follow up on Smith. Do you think his 40 time might push him to day 3? And then by the way, his pro day workout, he did some of the agility stuff. That was kind of a disaster too. Do you think he might get pushed to day 3? Because I loved his tape when I watched him, to be honest with you. I thought he was really good on film.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good football player at the end of the day. To your point, yeah, I think there might be some skepticism that could hurt him in his draft stock. And, he didn't run a great time, but I don't think he ran a terrible time either. I just think that, these guys get bigger, stronger, faster every year, John, that when they don't run
Right.
an eye-popping time, what's going on? What's wrong? Well, he's just a good football player, right? So that's where I fall on Chris Smith. But yeah, to your point, could he slide to 89? Potentially. I will say one of the bigger safeties I like in this is Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M.
Boy, there are a lot of people that love that kid, man.
Fast, physical, flies to the football, can get his hand on passes. 6'2", 200 pounds, size, speed, athleticism. Antonio Johnson, I think after Branch might be your best bang for the buck, and I think he could be had on day 2. So I think at safety, I'm a big fan of Sidney Brown.
I was gonna ask you about him. I love him too, man. But he is rocked up. By the way, he is like he is ready to go, man.
These Brown boys, the Canada invasion, the Canada boys, they're taking the league by storm. I'll tell you, Sidney Brown. I mean, how do you not like this young man? And I'll tell you what, this Marte Mapu from Sacramento State. Oh my God, Nico Bolden from Kent State. Remember these names. Marte Mapu. I'm still learning the name. He was trending towards a mid-round pick. He got injured at his pro day, but he is a chess piece. He could play linebacker. He could play safety. I'm going to give you another guy, John. Michael Ayers out of Ashland. Okay. Started at safety, actually came as a wide receiver cornerback, bulked up about 40, 50 pounds, walked on to Ashland, tore his ACL as a senior in high school. Scouts came in the spring, timed him in the 4-5 range as a linebacker. Sky's the limit for Michael Ayers out of Ashland. Might play him at linebacker, might play him at safety. I think he gets drafted. Nico Bolden is a lengthy, athletic kid out of Kent State. Look out for the Patriots. They usually have their finger on the pulse with these Kent State guys. I don't know why, but Nico Bolden out of Kent State. Jason Taylor II from Oklahoma State is a guy to keep an eye on. And he could play safety, he could play corner, but this guy's all over the football. Great coverage guy. And then I'll tell you what, Jair Brown from Penn State, Trey Dean from Florida, they did run that sentence 40 times. And I think it's going to hurt their draft stock significantly. I think it made Trey Dean a mid-round pick to a potential undrafted free agent. He could play either safety position, very versatile, natural instincts. I'm not going to downgrade him, but I'll tell you what, he's going to be a great late round back. Jair Brown, I thought was a potential top 100 pick coming into the process. Now his testing is going to tell us otherwise, but I mean, whatever it's worth, I still will stack him into that category as a potential starter at the next level.
All right, finally, Rick, tell the folks what you're doing, where they can find your work. As you can tell, it's an encyclopedic knowledge of who's coming out in the draft. Where can they find all your great wisdom, Rick?
Hey, I appreciate that, John. NFLDraftBible.com will take us straight to the Sports Illustrated landing page. We're the official NFL draft content provider at Sports Illustrated. If you like this kind of information, we give it to you all year long. We've got the Substack newsletter. You can follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible for all of our latest live streams. You might have Johnny appearing on the show. You never know who's going to drop by there. So, we live this lifestyle. We love it. We breathe it, we eat it, we digest it. And of course, we always love coming on BBK and chopping it up. We go deep here on BBK.
We do. Absolutely. Rick, great stuff, man. Of course, you can check out Big Blue Kickoff Live. That's our other podcast. That's live every day for 12:30. Rick, awesome stuff, man. Great to have you as always. We're in a sprint now. We're under 5 weeks until the draft. Enjoy it, man. Get that draft Bible on paper.
Oh, baby. Buckle up.
Thanks for joining us at the John Settle Podcast, everybody. It's all brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time at any time. Visit PSEG.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. For Rick Serritella, I am John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.